The warrior is a contender for top DPS by the last tier, given lots of armor pen, but definitely going to be a slow starter out of the gate when you have limited access to these armor pen pieces. Whilst it's the least desirable tank of the 4 choices, you can absolutely clear all content from normal to heroic, from phase 1 to the final phase as a prop warrior. You have a lot easier time with AoE threat and a great tanking toolkit overall. As arms, you're one of only 2 specs that can bring the physical damage debuff taken by 4% debuff, as well as bringing Battle Shout, Command and Shout and being able to keep Sunders up. As Fury on cleave bosses, your damage will be exceptional even before getting too much armor pen. Fights like Kolaghan in Ulduar, you'll see warriors popping off, but in a single target fight early on, you'll still struggle to keep up with some of the big pumping single target classes. The new talents and abilities such as being able to dual wield 2 big handers as Fury, spin around Bladestorming as arms, or even just being able to charge around in combat in defensive stance makes it one of the most fun and mobile classes to play. And remember, the YouTube content creator plague of 2022 spreading info that warriors are useless in PvE until ICC, which is the last phase by the way, will get the easily swayed people to re-roll and potentially give you an easier time gearing up. With the Paladin, how do I even be objective? With the most overpowered tank and healer in all of Wrath of the Lich King. As protection, you'll be wanted in every raid, bringing so much utility like your hands, blessings and 2 raid cooldowns. Yes, 2 raid cooldowns. Divine Sacrifice giving 20% damage reduction for the entire raid, and Aura Mastery being able to make the raid immune to silence. They're both amazing and will be absolutely assigned to be used at specific times on specific fights. There is absolutely no downside to playing a Protection Paladin, so moving on to Retribution, which just feels so much better to play in Wrath of the Lich King on from TBC. But do not be under any assumption that they're a big pumper, because that does take time. You're able to put out incredible cleave, and any fight that has multiple adds next to each other, you really can enjoy using your Divine Storm to hit them all. Why are they slow out the gate? Unlike Warriors, it's not to do with lack of armor pen, it's actually your tier set that you're really waiting for, specifically your ICC tier set where you can reset your Divine Storm for even more spinning around goodness. Ret Paladins are very much a middle of the pack DPS up until then, but still extremely fun to play. And remember, replenishment is extremely important to your raid, and you are a spec that brings this. If you want to be a healer and you want to top every healing meter and actually now have AoE healing capability from the use of Glyph of Holy Light, Paladin is for you. With things like Beacon so you can heal 2 targets at once, Hot Supply from Flash of Light if it's being used on a target with your Sacred Shield, and quite literally, infinite amounts of mana. If you can play your class right and get in melee to slap the boss in times of low healing requirements, with Divine Plea on to run back out on 100% mana again, it's overpowered as And the DK, of course you want to play the new shiny class of Wrath of the Lich King, a superior tank to all others than prop paladins, yet still in certain situations even outshine our mighty protection paladin. In terms of DPS, they have amazing cleave and single target damage with 2 very unique feeling DPS specs. The DK really can do it all, except for heal. Being the tank who brings Hysteria for your Feral Druid, that's right, only Feral Druids by the way, that's it, just Feral Druids. Whilst also being able to bring Haste for your melee, Horn of Winter for strength and agility, 10% attack power. I mean, let's be honest, how many buffs does one single tank need to be able to bring? They really cover so much. The threat is amazing single target to the point where Icy Touch Spam is the single highest threat in the game, and once that boss is on you, you have no worries about losing him. Cooldowns to massively reduce the amount of spell damage you take, cooldowns to make you immune to stun and reduce all damage taken, interrupts, silences, pets. I mean, come on, you have everything. Dual wielding as Frost is one of the most fast-paced, proc-driven DPS classes in Wrath of the Lich King, only closely rivaled with Enhancement Shaman. You see amazingly big crits on multiple targets using Howling Blasts, massive single target hits or crits with Obliterate, and a unique resource system in the form of runes and runic power to just break the ordinary feel of all pre-Wrath classes. Or Unholy using a big two-hander using pets to deal massive damage and spreading hard-hitting diseases is absolutely amazing, and in most cases will outdamage Frost, but I still say Frost is the more fun to play. Personal opinion. Expect to see your DKs on top of the meters, top 3 more or less every fight as long as they know what they're doing. So if you can play the DK well, you will be a big pumper. As for the Hunter, it remains one of the most convenient classes to level in the game as Beast Mastery, being able to solo things out in the world which other classes will struggle with. Taming new Spirit Beasts which look amazing, or getting yourself a big Devil Saw. If you love just having cool looking pets, BM will be something you love. The pet system has been reworked completely to have one of 3 talent trees now, so you can customize your pets set up even more than in TBC. The major downside to Beast Mastery is unfortunately its damage output, and if you were wanting to go Beast Mastery main spec to raid with, I would suggest one of the other specs, or you will be so low on the damage meter in tier 7 even you'll be looking up at the warriors on details. Joke, warriors, joke. Survival, on the other hand, comes out swinging, with Explosive Shot doing incredible damage, forcing procs of your new talent Lock and Load, giving you even more use of Explosive Shot. They really are a super mobile, super pumper. To get the most out of survival, you can't be scared to get in melee and drop traps, also known as weaving. You bring replenishment to your raid and the ability to push those meters and to be seen as top on every single fight from phase 1 onwards, if you're good. If you want to push that damage even further, then switch into Marksman. When you can get yourself enough armor pen, you will be equally as godlike through tier 9 and 10, whilst typically Hunters are one of those reliable classes who always feature in the top 5 to 6 of the DPS in a 25-man. If you play this beast right, you absolutely can push for that top spot on certain encounters, even in tier 10. When it comes to the Shaman, I say it time and time again, Elemental goes through the similar story that it did in TBC. They come out pumping hard in tier 7, continue to do extremely competitive damage all the way through tier 8. When tier 9 comes out, which is Trial of the Crusader by the way, many classes get huge power spikes, and Elemental just continues that steady rise. So it's typically around this sort of point where you start to see the Elementals fall further down the meters. A Demonology Warlock can provide more spell power than the Totem of Wrath, even with only mediocre tier 7 gear, and ultimately everything an Elemental Shaman can bring can be covered by other classes that bring higher DPS. You'll have a great time for the first half of the expansion, and then just coast your way through to the end. Enhancement, on the other hand, is solid DPS from start to finish. Definitely a top 5 DPS on almost every fight, up until when other melee, like your Combat Rogues, Feral Druids, and Fury Warriors, start to get high amounts of armor pen. Then you'll fall a little bit behind, but still be competitive all the way until the end, bringing the most amount of strength and agility from any buff with improved totems, even just heroism or bloodlust in the absence of a Resto Shaman or Elemental Shaman, and quite honestly, past pushing groups later on in the expansion will likely get their heroism or bloodlust from an enhancement shaman over a Resto and Elemental. Resto Shaman's a great all-round healer with a great toolkit, bringing things like Mana Tide, Earth Shield, a different size heal for almost any occasion, and of course, Chain Heal. With the addition of Riptide and Tidal Waves, it really does add spice and flair to how you heal as a Resto Shaman, but the sad truth is, most raid leaders would prefer Holy Paladins, a Disc Priest, or even a Resto Druid over a Resto Shaman, providing heroism or bloodlust is being provided from somewhere else. This is not to say you can't compete on the healing meters against those other healers, you absolutely can. It's just a lack of providing anything unique, which puts a bit of a downer on the Resto Shaman. The Rogue will definitely not take me a minute to tell you how amazing they are on single target DPS as an assassination rogue. You only need 2 daggers that you can buy from the auction house at level 80, and you can instantly start pumping. The single target, if you're good, is absolutely unrivaled. I don't care what tier lists say, tier 7, single target. If you're assassination and you aren't top, you're doing it wrong. Sub is purely a PvP spec and you'll never use it for PvE unless for a bit of fun or Honour Amongst Thieves is broken like it was in original Wrath, in which case you'll probably all be sub. Combat, however, is another spec which scales so well with armor pen and weapon damage in general that as the eye level of the weapons rise, so does their damage. So does yours. Getting that armor pen either soft capped or hard capped just means you're a pumping machine, and continue pushing for number 1 on the meters every fight. The beautiful thing now is you can cleave, no longer restricted to only being seen as the big dick pumper when there isn't a second mob getting cleaved into. You can join those cleavers and show them how it's done. Whilst you can switch to combat, it's worth noting if you enjoy the more simple, slower pace of assassination, you can absolutely stay as assassination from Wrath pre-patch all the way to the Cata pre-patch, which we're definitely going to get. And the only disadvantage is going to be when there's more than one target stood in front of you. And then the Druid, Feral DPS, stand up and rejoice, the completely different playstyle. No more power shifting, no more Wolf's Head Helm, no more thousands of gold a week on consumables just to compete for anything to look respectable. You come out of the pre-patch as a beast and you end Wrath as a beast. As a class which scales incredibly well with armor pen but isn't reliant on it, you're one of the few physical DPS which are extremely competitive in tier 7 without access to armor pen. You have cleave now, although it's bursty and hard to sustain on long fights without using the reworked Tiger's Fury, but still, any cleave is good cleave as Feral, and if you're on the fence about going Feral DPS, if you have the skill to back it up, it's an amazing spec and you'll do magical things throughout the entire expansion. As a tank, you won't be in as much demand as prop paladins and DKs, but you definitely hold your own. And you're still that big meat shield. Situations would be rare where raids are specifically looking for you as a feral tank, but they would be even rarer where you was turned away for being one. You're that happy medium tank that no one has a problem with. Balanced by name and balanced by nature is exactly what it is, balanced. It's not your big dick single target pumper, but it has incredible AoE with Hurricane and Starfall, albeit Starfall has a cooldown. The single target is respectable and very RNG driven, without massively high levels of gear. So you can have some really good fights on the meter, and you can have some really average fights on the meter. You're at the mercy of your crit chance. But overall, the Boomy is wanted. It brings lots of utility, combat res, tranquility, innovate, solid single target, great raid buffs, and super strong bursty AoE to quickly dispose of adds. Whilst you don't scale terribly well, it's a similar story damage-wise to the Elemental Shaman. You'll start pumping early in Tier 7, and by Tier 10, you'll slip down the meters, but will still be wanted for everything mentioned before. Resto Druids bring Revitalize, and with a potential uptime being huge from Rejuve and Wild Growth, you can return loads of energy, loads of runic power, loads of rage, and mana over the course of a fight. Being that healer that can actually not only do massive blanket healing, where in certain situations you can dominate the meters, you also boost the raid's DPS. Whilst you only situationally dominate meters because the fight needs to be built for that hot style of play. By this I mean the likes of Sapphiron, where there's constant small damage going out on everyone for the entire fight. You'll struggle on the more bursty tank healing and where damage on single targets need topping off quickly. If you have a Disc Priest in the group, it can also cripple you a lot because so much of the damage is being absorbed that your heals don't get the chance to shine. Overall, not the weakest of the healers, but definitely under Holy Paladins and Disc Priests in terms of overall usefulness in raids. The Mage is just a solid pumper throughout. You'll transition from Arcane to Fire with high levels of crit, but quite honestly, they haven't changed all that much. You get a completely new way of playing Arcane with Arcane Blast stacks being dropped by using things like Arcane Missiles, which you can use with procs like Missile Barrage, for those times of mana preservation. And of course, going absolutely nuts with Arcane Blast and hearing your Arcane Mages calling for innovates from every druid in your group will be a thing. They can do exceptional single target damage from the word go, but definitely have a heavy reliance on innovates to be able to do so. Later, with high amounts of crit and the inevitable switch to fire, you absolutely explode. The single target and AoE are both incredible, and by the end of ICC, you can almost guarantee to see fire mages on top of your meters. If not on top, definitely in the top 3. Mage is one of those safe bets. You got Frost, which is amazing for solo play, and if your group was lacking replenishment, you can bring that with Frost. It would be a DPS loss to you personally, but if your group needs it, they need it. Your damage from start to finish is top quality, even if Arcane has the reliance on external cooldowns from other members of the raid. And once you go fire and start using things like your Hot Streak procs to fire off instant Pyroblasts, and just see enemies burning while your DPS skyrockets on the meters, and inevitably Warcraft logs, it's hard to say it's not a safe choice for anyone on the fence between a Mage and any other class. And with the Priest, if you want to be a healer but don't want to be a Holy Paladin, look no further. People sleep on the power of the Holy Priest, but they bring such amazing utility like Guardian Spirit, which can have such a huge uptime with a glyph, amazing AoE healing, and a bit like I said for Shaman, they have the toolkit which just has a heal for every situation. The playstyle doesn't change too much from TBC, but it changes enough to make it more enjoyable. The big one in the room though, let's be honest, the Disc Priest. Every group's going to want you as a Disc Priest. They absorb so much damage, even bringing an effect like Revitalize from a Druid, but in the form of Rapture. And dare I say it, they're overpowered. A Holy Paladin and a Disc Priest together can do so much healing, so many absorbs, and bring so much utility that any raid group without the duo will definitely feel it. It's not the most complex healer to play. In fact, I say it's the easiest healer to get amazing results from, because you're quite literally spamming 4 to 5 shields, penance on cooldown, and pom on cooldown. Yeah, sure, you can do a little bit more than that, but, you know, that's what you'll spend 90% of your time doing. But the results from it are truly amazing, and pre-shielding most of the raid before a huge AoE comes in, and watching the meter when you was rock bottom to flying up above everyone else is extremely satisfying. If we were talking healing tier list here, Disc Priest for me is S tier, right up there with Paladin. But we ain't talking tier lists because they're crap. The Shadow Priest is so much better in Wrath and really can put out amazing numbers. Can they consistently top damage meters? No. They will consistently be one of those middle-of-the-pack, reliable damage, replenishment-bringing, utility-providing machines. There's certain fights, namely Algalon, the extra boss in Ulduar, requiring a key from doing hard mode encounters to access, which is made so much more simple with Dispersion. Dispersion not being capped by max health compared to things like Anti-Magic Shell is amazing. You'll be one of those people soaking, or what I call cheesing, mechanics, so everyone else can focus on pumping, but what an addition to the raid. To be blunt though, if your goal is to top damage meters consistently on every fight, the Shadow Priest won't be for you. You absolutely can top some fights, specifically multi-dot situations or massive amounts of adds to AoE, because actually your AoE mines here hits pretty hard, it hits pretty fast, but the pack needs to be big because the mob that you actually cast it on takes no damage from it. Last but not least, the Warlock, the reliable pumper throughout the entire expansion who can and you will likely see top in lots of fights from launch until close. With two very different but very competitive specs being Affliction and Demonology, you can mix it up as often as you like. Destruction will be used very rarely as it brings inferior damage but can provide replenishment if you needed it for your raid. Warlock's strange in the fact that to pump to the best of your ability, you really don't want short execute phases, and actually, the shorter the fight, the more damaging it can be to your DPS. Gaining damage at lower than 35% health from Death's Embrace and your Drained Soul doing 4 times the amount of damage if the target's below 25%, it goes without saying, if that phase goes particularly fast, your damage will suffer. That's not to say the execute phase is all you rely on though, because your DPS will be high the entire fight either way, but it does have the potential to creep up and up and up over an extended period of time under 35% health. Overall, you'll expect to see Affliction locks as your top 5 DPS spec throughout, and definitely a top 3 throughout tier 7 and 8. Demonology will be wanted in every single raid. They bring spell power to the raid superior to that of an elemental shaman quite early into the expansion through Demonic Pact. And also, they're in a similar situation to Affliction, where your big pumping phase is at the end, preferably inside your new shiny cooldown Metamorphosis, which looks fantastic by the way. But when the boss is under 35% health, you can spam Soulfire for massive crits until the boss is dead. Both Affliction and Demonology can do amazing AoE with Seed of Corruption, but Demo is definitely superior and can put out incredible AoE with Metamorphosis, Immolation Aura, and spamming Seed while your Felguard is cleaving away. It's a sight to see and one you'll enjoy every time you do it. To round off the video, play what you want. Hopefully you've got from this video that honestly, any of them are fine. Whatever you want to play, even Warrior, you'll be fine as. They've all got their strengths and weaknesses. When we say, Class A is top DPS, Class B is second DPS, normally there's not that much between them. A couple of 100 DPS. We're not talking a couple of K. This isn't TBC. This is RAF. Play what class stands out to you the most and the one that you'll enjoy throughout the expansion the most. Roll the outro. Like and subscribe, actually. Like and subscribe. Roll the outro. See ya. There's lots of ways you can support the channel to keep me here putting out World of Warcraft content and covering all future MMOs. Consider joining the channel as a member. You get access to emotes. Everyone will know you're a member when you comment on future videos because you get a nice icon next to your name. And you get access to members-only videos, which I'll be putting a lot of on the channel throughout the year. Additionally, there's a Patreon link in the description as well. Thank you for watching all the way to the end, and I'll see you on the next one.